Good morning, students. Today we are going to read the movement of the supply curve in the topic of theory of supply in the subject of economics O levels. So concentrate yourself. Here we are going to start the movements of the supply curve, changes in the condition of the supply, that is non-price determinants. So whenever there are non-price determinants involved and there is a change of the supply, always there occurs movement of the supply curve. So concentrate yourself here. Here we are going to start now. Together with price, there are many other factors which affect the supply. These are referred to as the conditions of the supply, the non-price determinants. So other than the price, the factors are called the non-price determinants. Any change in these will cause a shift of the supply curve. Remember that these factors are considered in isolation, that is ceteris paribus. So here are the factors. These are non-price determinants. Number one, the technology. Number two, the price of the factors of the production. Number three, the scale of the production expectations. Number four, government policy, taxes and subsidies. Number five, prices and profitability of the other goods. Number six is weather conditions. And number seven is unexpected events. So these are non-price determinants which actually affect the supply of the commodity. And here will be the curves. So look now, supply curve inward shift. So this was the original supply curve, and when the bad effect was there on the commodities production or something else, so the supply curve will move inward, so supply will be reduced. And when favorable things will happen, so the supply curve will move towards right, so supply will be increased, so supply curve outward shifts. And one by one we are going to read now. So the first thing that we are going to read is the level of the technology. So definitely the level of the technology will affect the supply of the commodity. An increase in technology improving the method of the production or the allocation of the resources will increase supply, shifting the supply curve outwards as in figure 5.5. So supply will be increased when there will be increase in the technology that will improving the method of the production. Example is here, the amount that a firm can produce each week is determined partly by the kind of the machinery it uses. If a newly invented machine can produce 40% more commodities for the same total cost, then we would expect a producer to produce and supply more of that commodity, thus shifting the supply curve to the right. So definitely the most modern machines actually waste very less and make things at a very speedy pace. So definitely the supply will be increased. The number two factor that we are going to read is the cost of the factors of the production. An increase in the cost of the factors of the production, that is land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship, will reduce the supply of the commodity. So definitely the rise in the cost of the factors of the production definitely will reduce the supply of the commodity. So the higher the wages paid to the workers, the rent of the land or the interest on the capital, the less the supply will be, ceteris paribus, thus shifting the supply curve inwards to the left as in figure 5.4. Example is here. If the price of the producing a commodity rises by 30% due to increase in the wages and rent, then the producers will find it less attractive to produce at this price because the cost of the production is getting higher and the sale price remains the same. So definitely the producers will supply less. Thus they will produce less, shifting the supply curve to the left as in figure 5.4. The next factor that we are going to read is the scale of the production. This would include machinery. The quantity of the goods supplied will change if the firm increases its capacity to produce. So if a firm increases its capacity to produce, definitely supply will be more. Example is here, if a car factory installed two more assembly lines, so definitely if there are two more assembly lines, so production will be increased. For car production, then it will be able to produce more cars than it was previously able to, because its capacity has increased, thus shifting the supply curve to the right as in figure 5.5. The next factor that will affect the supply is the government policy, that is taxes and subsidies. Government policy may influence the production decision of the suppliers, producers. Taxes are compulsory charges on the levies imposed by the government upon individual or firms, in this case the firm, thus increasing the cost of the supplying the goods. So definitely if the tax are applied or tax rate is increased, the cost of the production will be increased. This will shift the supply curve to the left because cost of the production is higher now. On the other hand, subsidies, that is called positive tax, are government payment to producers or consumers of a good or service aimed at maintaining a low cost of production, thus decreasing the cost of supplying the good. This will shift the supply curve to the right because the cost of the production will be decreased because government is paying for the production and or the government is paying to the consumers. Example is here, the government in the England subsidizes dairy farmers in order to keep them in an otherwise unprofitable industry. The US government taxes, so that was the example of the subsidies, and here is the example of the taxes. The US government taxes high pollution production processes in order to discourage these producers in the hope of shifting the supply curve to the left. So definitely this is very common sense. If the cost of the production gets higher, supply will be less, and if the cost of the production gets lower, supply will be more. Here is another factor that we are going to read is the price and the profitability of the other goods. If it is cheaper to produce good A and good A yields more profit in comparison to good B. So this is very common sense that the producers will shift to produce good A in spite of good B. Then suppliers are less likely to produce good B. This will shift the good A supply curve to the right and the supply curve of the good B to the left. Example is here, farmers in these certain countries find it more profitable to grow illegal drugs than to grow crops such as the lettuce or the cotton. The reason is that they will get much higher revenues by selling the illegal crops, causes these crops sell at much higher price or the market than cotton and lettuce do, because the price of the illegal drugs is much more higher than the lettuce or the cotton. The illegal crops are therefore more profitable. The supply curve of the lettuce would shift to the left, supply will go down. The supply curve of the illegal crops will shift to the right as more farmers shift their production from lettuce, cotton to the illegal crops. The next factor that we are going to read is the weather conditions. The weather is an important determinant of the supply of the agricultural products like coffee, wheat, and rice. It can also affect the supply of the other goods and services which are dependent upon weather conditions. Example is here, in 1985, frost damaged the coffee crop in Brazil, which led to a fall in the supply of the coffee to the market. Droughts in these certain countries may affect the supply of the wheat. For example, this would shift the supply curve of the wheat to the left. So this is very common sense. If the weather is favorable for the commodities to grow, definitely a bumper crop will be there. So there will be more supply. And if there are unfavorable conditions regarding weathers for the commodities, so less supply will be there. Conversely, good weather would help produce a bumper harvest of the wheat, resulting in increased supply. The next factor that we are going to read is the unexpected events. This category usually includes freak weather conditions, war, and natural disasters. For example, there will be droughts, there may be cyclones, there may be war. If they have an adverse effect on the supply, they would shift the supply curve to the left. Example is here, the Kobe earthquake in Japan destroyed roads, public buildings, etc., thus greatly reducing the supply, shifting the curve to the left of the goods and services available. Here is a short definition: alternative supply. Alternative supply, that is also called competitive supply, is essentially the supply of the goods that can be treated as substitutes. For example, train versus bus, because they are competitive in supply. Okay, finally, we are going to read some important notes. An increase in the supply at the same price levels due to non-price factors means a shift of the supply curve to the right. So increase in supply will shift the supply curve to the right other than the price levels. Meanwhile, an increase in the quantity supplied due to an increase in the price means a movement up along the supply curve. So if price is involved, there will be a movement along this supply curve. And if other than the price, the non-price determinants are involved, so there will be a shift in the supply curve. Next is a decrease in the supply at the same price levels due to non-price factors means a shift of the supply curve to the left. Meanwhile, a decrease in the quantity supplied means a downward movement along the supply curve. So this was the lecture, students. I hope so this will be much more easier for you to understand now. So read this lecture again, understand it, learn it, and make your notes. Thank you so much.